Hi guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to choose your central idea for the math exploration. And it's basically the step one of the Kindle book I've recently published. And it shows you how to actually um, start your math exploration. And it's a 5-step process. I'm actually going to explore step one of the process. And the reason behind doing the video is that a student came to see me with a couple of random ideas in her mind, and we started to talk about it. And at one point, it was going in all different directions because it was like, um, which method actually will help me to score a lot in use of math, or can you give me an idea about a topic which is actually very easy to do, or which will score you a lot of points. And at some point, I realized that the direction itself is wrong, and that was one of the reasons why I actually created the guide, because you don't do an exploration because it's going to give you a lot of marks after that you've completed it. I mean, you would like it to be successful so that you can actually score a good grade. But the whole purpose of the exploration is actually to get an idea which actually fascinates you and actually develop it and ensure that once you develop it, it meets all the assessment criteria and you actually have something which is good enough. So what we ended up doing was that we ended up sitting down, and then I told her that, okay, let me just open the manuscript of the book I published, which has the 5-step process, and let us just go through step one, and then let us see, how we can get you started with it. So in this video, I'm going to actually show you or give you an insight about how the discussion developed and how we actually took the random thoughts, random ideas she had in her mind, and how we narrowed it down, and how we tried to make the links with the math and all that. So I'm going to show that to you in this video. So I've written down a couple of bullet points of the discussion I had with her, and I'm just going to open that document. So what you see on the screen right now is step one from the math exploration guide. And the title is Choosing a Central Idea. And it starts with a brainstorming session where you generate a list of topics of interest. That's the first thing you do. So when we had that discussion, I just told her, okay, you tell me what are the things which really passionates you, what are the things which you spend time on outside of school, and it's not necessarily linked to the work you have to produce at school. So we came up with a list of different things. I'm going to give you the list of the different things. So we came up with an interest in dogs, in fashion, in car racing, in car modeling in general, so how cars look attractive, in volleyball, sports, climate change, and then since it was about the exploration, the person mentioned statistics. All right. So what do we do with that list of interest? So the first one was dogs. So it wasn't really easy to actually come up with something which will help us to actually link dogs to the exploration. Maybe there is one, but at that moment we couldn't find anything. Fashion. When we started to talk about it, we had ideas of shapes, optimization, surface area, proportion, because you have to actually create these dresses or clothing apparel which will fit the model. So we had all these ideas which we wrote next to fashion. Car racing, it's linked to speed, to lapse time, possibly correlation between two different parameters, prediction, probability. So these were the things which came up from the brainstorming. And then when we were looking at how cars can be modeled and or how cars look beautiful, we had that idea that, okay, we could use modeling when we are observing the shape of cars. So we could take the car, put that on a graphing software, and then try to map different curves to the car, so that it becomes a modeling math exploration. So that's the idea we had. We got a block on volleyball. Sports was a bit too vast because you have to actually narrow it down, choose a specific sport, and then you can develop it further. For climate change, we had ideas about rate of change, calculus, and then stats also was a bit too broad, too general, so we couldn't develop it further. So we stopped we stopped the discussion at one point and then said, okay, what are the three key things we can take here? So it was fashion, car racing, and then climate change. And then we pushed it a bit further and we said, okay, what's really interesting for you? Okay, what's the one thing which really which you really find passionate? So we end up stopping on fashion. Okay, and then that was the point whereby we said, okay, now we have that central idea. What do we do with it now? So we have fashion, and from the brainstorming, we had shapes, optimization, and proportion. But it's not enough. We still just have general ideas. So how do we develop it further? So if you look at the main steps on the screen right now, we've already done the brainstorming session, which I just went through with you. We generated the list of topics of interest. We considered how these topics relate to different mathematical concepts, but these were not from research, but just from discussion. The second thing you do is you research. So you conduct research to understand the scope and depth of the potential topics. So since we already stopped on fashion, because that was what was of interest to the person, we actually did some research on fashion. So I did some Google searches and then came up with a list of different things we can explore. And that's what I'm going to show you on the screen here. So when it comes to fashion, you could look at pattern making, draping, symmetry, and these are all on the screen right now. You could explore proportions and ratios, body measurements, and the golden ratio, which is something interesting because a lot of students use the golden mean ratio in the math exploration. If you don't know what it is, the golden mean ratio was actually used to create the Mona Lisa, and it's considered to be one of the most beautiful paintings you have because it has like the right proportion. It follows the golden ratio. So we could have explored that in terms of clothing. What kind of clothing actually will give us a very attractive outcome if we use the golden ratio? But it's something we didn't choose to pursue. And then under algebra, we actually had cost calculations. So algebraic equations that help in determining the amount of fabric needed, pricing, and optimizing costs for production. So that's one thing we found interesting. So that's why I highlighted it when I actually created the list. And there are many amazing things which can be explored. You have angle calculations, you have 3D modeling. But the next one, which actually was interesting for the person, because it was a discussion between the teacher and the student, was actually the market research. So statistical methods that help designers to analyze trends, customer preferences, and market demand. So that's another math method which was interesting. Okay, so we highlighted that too, and then you will see there are further things. For example, vector mathematics about digital design. So if the person is interested in design and in using CAD, then actually that would be of interest. But in this case, the third topic of interest was actually trend analysis. So designers using pattern recognition to identify emerging trends and customer preferences for analyzing large data sets. So we took these three mathematical methods which we could use for the topic fashion, and then we said, okay, now we need to come up with that title. So how do we do that? So we have cost calculation, we have market research, and then we have trend analysis. So then we said that, okay, 1 and 3 can be combined. And then how do we combine that? So we started to actually write a statement which will try to, envelope all these three math methods which we just saw here. So we ended up writing the following statement. So evaluating costs and understanding trends in the fashion industry. So that will be the title of the math exploration. Now, it doesn't mean that it's going to stay like this, but what it means is that we've got a proper title we can start with, which we can develop. And we've actually looked at three mathematical techniques or domains which can be explored further and which do exist out there. So we just need to now find the equations. So the task I've assigned to the student is to actually go out there and find those algebraic equations which help in determining the amount of fabric needed and all those things. So that's how you start the process. Okay, and I actually wanted to show you how it's really used in real life, and it's really really important that you start well. Otherwise, what happens is that students start an IE, they write the intro without having thought about the math method, without having thought that okay, it's something which is so I do have the math method, I have a solid idea, and I will end up creating something in the long run. They just blindly start something which they're passionate about without checking whether the math is foolproof, and then they end up stopping halfway. Then that's where you actually change title quite late, and it puts even more pressure. It's very important to actually start it well.